Behold, it's Natalia. Let's go find some monkeys, shall we?
Would you say sex is like riding a bicycle?
Nothing gets me going like Christmas and wigs. Let's check out this show.
I remember the first creature I beheld. He was a squirrel. His name was Kevin.
I heard you need a DNA sample.
I want to find light and joy in things that bring us together and unite us. And I think science is something that can unite us. Ow. God damn.
There's a world out there, a world that needs to be beheld.
Hello, behold, welcome back to another episode of Survival of the Filthiest. I am your host, anthropologist, comedian, weirdo, and now mother of kidney stones, Natalia Reagan. Yes, I have little kidney stones brewing in my kidneys. So if at any point I have to get up and run to the bathroom, apologies in advance. But I started this show because honestly, what the futz is happening in this world, especially our country? We have a war on healthcare, people of colors, gays, bays, jetways, veterans, queers, engineers, the vax, paperbacks, teachers, creatures, women, and let's face it, science, especially epidemiology and vaccine development. Thank you, RFK Jr. So what better way to resist than to have scientists, comedians, and educators come on this show and teach us what we don't seem to understand. And a lot of it is because the education system is broke. So here's a quick reminder that if you like the show, to please like it, subscribe it, share it with friends, enemies, frenemies, whoever. Just share it, please. And if you want to help the production of this illustrious show, you can join my Patreon, and every little dime helps, make this all happen. So please feel free to join my Patreon. Well, folks, diseases. Oh, here, hold on. This is the clunky part where I have to start my little PowerPoint presentation. There we go. Yeah. Oh, that's our guest. A little sneak preview. Dr. Ian Boulton. Good times. But I'm going to show you. Okay, so diseases, folks, have been part of the human experience since our existence began. But it wasn't until humans began to settle down in agrarian societies that epidemics and pandemics really emerged. So let's blame the Neolithic revolution, shall we? Because, in hunter-gatherer societies, diseases could, flare up, and they'd kill off a swath of the population. And those that survived gained some sort of immunity to this disease. And then if they were faced with it in the future, they'd be okay. But as large-scale societies emerged during the Neolithic, we had diseases like the Black Plague. Hold on, this is the clunky part where I get to show you. The Black Plague started to spread around, and it had a chance to, mutate. And because of things like, hold on one second, close proximity of people. So when you have cities where live on top of each other, basically, you got poor sanitation. We got human-animal interaction. I mean, we all love our livestock, sometimes a little too much, looking at you, the Scottish. Sorry, Ian. The New Zealanders are a close second when it comes to the sheep shagging. But in the case of rats and gerbils during the Black Plague, that was a big problem when it came to spreading of that particular disease. And the Black Death claimed about 25 million to 50 million people in Europe during the mid-14th century. Damn. If only we had vaccines. If only. But, yeah, here's some bubonic plagues. Look at that. Look how sexy that is. Boils. Let's bring boils back. No, thank you. No, thank you. Look at that. Oh, my God. Looks like a promiscuous horde, but more death, less sex. Speaking of which, sending my thoughts and prayers to the orgy dome at Burning Man right now, which I think got destroyed in the storms. Okay, that brings me to my next point, which cut to COVID-19 in 2020. The world basically shut down actually on my 41st birthday. I was born on March 13th. And that is when basically the WHO was like, hey, this is a global pandemic. And Trump announced a national emergency. But during COVID-19, we had a disease, a pandemic that had a chance to basically spread like wildfire across the world because we have globalization, we have global travel. And this disease was able to outrun the immunity of the population and develop into, they had the original strain, and then you had Delta, and then you had Omicron. So this disease was just constantly sort of outrunning the immunity of our population. But because of the COVID vaccine, we actually saw an avoidance of 14 million, if not more, deaths around the world. So it really did save a swath of the population.
Mhm.
We did have, a lot of deaths here in the US because there was a lot of bad messaging and a lot of people not understanding how vaccines work or even just this that science changes. We won't go into too much of a tirade about that. And by we, I mean me. But that science is more of a verb, less of a noun. And I think as more information was coming out to Americans about what COVID was and how to prevent it, people were like, but wait a minute, I thought it was just don't touch your face and wash your hands. But it turns out that wearing masks did really help keep the spread of COVID down. Hold on one second. Oh yeah, but the COVID vaccine again helped prevent 14 million deaths. But the COVID vaccine is an RNA vaccine. Where are we going? Oh wait, there we go. It's an RNA vaccine, which is a little bit different than the MMR vaccine. The MMR vaccine uses a live attenuated version of the pathogen to elicit immune response, but RNA vaccines use messenger RNA created in a laboratory to teach our cells, basically giving them a blueprint of how to make a protein or just even a piece of the protein that triggers an immune response inside our bodies. It is so fascinating and it's not new. And world-changing mRNA vaccines aren't just treating COVID, they are revolutionizing the treatment of diseases like flu, cancer, hepatitis C, and more. And there's a lot of misinformation about RNA vaccines. And unfortunately, the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., who has zero healthcare experience, just decided earlier this month to defund all RNA research. Boo. Hold on. There we go. Yeah. Bad news bears. This came out today. He basically demanded a vaccine study be retracted because he just didn't like it. He had no real reason to back it up, but the vaccine study said that the small amount of aluminum that is in vaccines does no harm. He wanted it retracted just because he did not like those results. So I'm pretty sure that RFK really just means a real fucking knucklehead because this guy does not know what he's talking about. He's incredibly dangerous. And that's why we need to talk to real scientists doing the work, doing the research, and not listen to somebody who is just an anti-vaxxer who comes from a family with a legacy. So today, I'm very excited because I am joined with an RNA vaccine expert who has helped develop and distribute this life-saving technology. He's coming to us from Scotland. I'm very excited. It's Dr. Ian Boulton. He is an analytical biochemist with a demonstrated history of leadership and practical expertise in biotechnology industry. He has worked as a consultant for various pharmaceutical companies developing life-saving biological drugs and vaccines, including the COVID-19 vaccine. So, people of the internet, I want you to welcome Dr. Ian Boulton. Welcome. Welcome to the show.
It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for the very generous introduction. To be clear, though, I'm a very small part of a very big sort of collective of people all pushing in one direction. And if it wasn't me doing this, it would be someone else. So none of these things are achieved as an individual, and it's all a team effort. And that's why, in fact, in part, the pandemic was an illustration of how things can work when we choose to work together.
See, this is a great example of throwing out American individualism and exceptionalism. You were admitting it's a team effort. It's not
Absolutely.
just one
Yeah.
person.
Mhm. And
But
when
you
we have
do
a global problem, it quickly makes it very apparent that we're all, in fact, neighbors. There are,
right?
national boundaries are arbitrary, imaginary, and they are not recognized by infectious pathogens.
No, they don't, go, oh, wait, hold on. Let me show my papers. I need to get to, nope. And that's something that the US definitely doesn't seem to understand in the case of just immigration here, that people move. People have always moved since the dawn of time. We will continue to move, and boundaries and borders are really arbitrary at the end of the day. And diseases do not play by any rules. They do not, again, do a survey before they decide to infect somebody. So,
That's right.
and yeah, and COVID definitely was, I think, popping the United States cherry, because we've had great vaccine rollouts through decades
Mhm.
that have basically eliminated things like measles, which is one of the most highly contagious
Mhm.
diseases out there.
Yeah.
But then we've seen now with the anti-vaxxer movements, these outbreaks popping up all over the US,
Yeah.
not just with the Amish.
No,
We can't
no,
just blame them. So
no.
I want to
It,
know, yeah, how did you get into vaccine development and expertise? Like what
okay.
is, can you
Yeah.
tell me a bit of your story?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be brought up in the Scottish education system, which is quite comprehensive and encourages people to develop whatever talent they may have. So early in high school, when I was learning basic science and discovering, vaccines as a means of preventing things from happening, as well as the engineering of biotech, really got me excited. And I was able to follow up on that through high school study, subsequently an undergraduate degree, and from there, a doctorate in biochemistry. And the wonderful thing about the education system here is that that kind of training can be funded if you're able to complete it,
Whew.
which is a wonderful thing and a huge privilege. But that's the concept of commonwealth, which is one of those socialist ideas that is a little bit scary, but kind of makes a lot of sense. That people who are able to develop talents are encouraged to develop talents, and everyone wins from that. I mean, it's a very humbling thing, but it's also an extremely valuable one. Plus, of course, consistent support from friends and family, where I was allowed to be weird enough and focused enough to just get on with that rather than, have a whole of a number of other things going on in life. So definitely I'm very privileged in that respect. And I owe a debt of honor and thanks to everyone who's contributed all the way down the line.
No, that's one of the things that I wish the US, of course, had was education that was funded, that
Mhm.
was encouraged, that was fostered, and mentorship too. I mean, it's tough when educators, because I was a professor for years, and are not compensated in a way that allows them to have a decent life, and
Mhm.
so they can't necessarily be there for their students, like say in a nation where they do value educators
Sure.
and those students, right? To allow
Mhm.
them to have that education. So we are unfortunately living in a country where they're the educated elite. They're almost looked down upon. There's a sort of willful ignorance and
Mhm.
mockery of those that are educated. Which I think is a big part of our downfall when it comes to vaccine education and development.
Yeah. I can certainly understand it. And from a social perspective, people who are perhaps, an expert in one area may be quite terrifying to others with little expertise. So part of our responsibility as scientists is in communication and in response to actual rational inquiry. Where it distresses me, though, is when rational inquiry isn't available, as in when the US government says things that are demonstrably untrue and present this as if it's not policy but informed comment, like RFK's position on, well, many different things, but vaccines in particular.
Yeah,
Uh, the things that he said are spectacularly flawed and dramatically dangerous. And if it was him making decisions for himself solely, I would have no issue with this, or very much limited, or a very much more limited issue than what I currently feel. Whereas he's presenting information that will, in fact, end up getting kids killed.
absolutely.
Um,
I mean, he led to a outbreak in Samoa that
mhm,
killed multiple children,
yeah,
a measles outbreak, by encouraging them not to get the MMR
mm,
vaccine, which has been
exactly.
proven to be very safe and
That's
effective.
right.
Uh,
And you made an extremely good point earlier on, in that as a culture, and I mean the developed world, the whole of the developed world, for the last 100 years or so, we've lived in a situation that's never happened in human history before, and that is one where our kids aren't dying of infectious disease. And I'm saying that as a broad statement. Of course, some are, but in all previous generations, this was a much more prevalent thing. Measles, mumps, rubella, cholera, typhoid, diphtheria, meningitis, pneumococcus. These were things that killed your kids. And thankfully, we're in a position where we don't, or we can dramatically reduce that massive burden, as well as the tragedies associated with it. So when we choose to step back into a more deadly past, it concerns me. And, there's the fear of progress and the fear of the unknown versus the fear of the actual known that, we've lived through, which is lots of tiny graves present for no reason whatsoever. But I'm not a parent. I can only imagine how a well-meaning parent can make decisions on a subject that's complex and difficult to understand. And that's the sadness, that amplifies the sadness of the damage done by RFK Jr. He should know better. He can know better. He is choosing to continue to spread dangerous misinformation. I can only imagine that he thinks it's not misinformation, in which case he's dangerously incompetent and has no business talking like policy.
No business whatsoever. Yeah, no, and it's not that far back. I know that I have family members that did not make it past childhood. Recent family members that, in my mom's had siblings that, one in particular that died of a disease that probably could have been prevented if there were, better vaccines and distribution in parts of rural Appalachia. This is a problem that has been around in the past century, like you said. And until you're really faced with that, the ignorance kind of continues to move on. This is kind of a funny tangent, but my OBGYN in Los Angeles for many years treated the Playboy Playmates. And one of them was Jenny McCarthy. And I remember, I didn't know this, and I saw her book in my doctor's office, and I opened it, and there was an inscription, thank you so much for helping me with a difficult pregnancy. And I just was like, and my poor doctor, because he of course was very like, I got the Gardasil, which is the HPV vaccine, as an older adult. I already had HPV, like everybody did at my particular age. Everyone pretty much had it, but I got it anyways because there's different strains that it can protect you against, even though I was too old for it technically at that point. So he was very pro-vaccine, but I remember I asked him when he sat me down to give me my results or whatever, I was like, hey, I noticed that you delivered so-and-so's baby, Jenny McCarthy. How does that feel? Or how are you feeling knowing that she kind of created this anti-vax movement? And, he was so generous in terms of like, I can't control my patients. I can't, but I was also like, God, that's got to be really tough knowing that ushered in a whole new movement of anti-vaxxers, and
it's a whole new movement, but the same old ideas that are, as we discussed previously, anti-vaccine dogma or reasoning is either incomplete or inaccurate. It's never both complete and accurate at the same time. And that's the tragedy of it, because there's always a little bit of truth thrown in. And I've deconstructed various anti-vaccine papers over the years, and they all rely on this exact this type of epistemology, which is embarrassingly poor. And it gives you the sad part is many people who are proposing an anti-vaccine position know well enough to know that it's incorrect.
Can you give an example of maybe like the best, or I guess the most egregious deconstruction you had to do of an anti-vaxxer argument?
Well, I'm thinking back to a classical one published by a guy called Harris Coulter, who was, for reasons I don't understand, both scientifically informed and an anti-vaccine person. And he wrote an article, not in a peer-reviewed journal, of course, describing how bad the polio vaccine was and all the terrible things that it did and how it, in fact, didn't even work. And each and every argument included was in that area of either being incorrect or incomplete or both. For instance, he made he he proposed that the vaccine didn't work because after its introduction, several thousand people still got the disease. And if I look further into the data that he's citing, the study involved is several thousand people who were not vaccinated, in fact, got the disease. So it doesn't say anything at all about the vaccine. And this was a deconstruction carried out when I was a lot less experienced. It's not difficult to do. It just takes a little bit of insight and a little bit of detail analysis. But to a greater or lesser extent, all of the anti-vaccine arguments fall into this category. The aluminum argument is a fascinating one as well. So to briefly summarize it, historically, some vaccines were stabilized using, or some vaccines included an adjuvant called aluminum hydroxide, which is not a thing that naturally occurs being injected into your body. So that's not an ideal situation. It's included for really, really good immunological reasons, and it improves the efficacy of the vaccine, and it results in a requirement for a lower dose, so less is injected, less of the nasty stuff derived from the pathogen is injected, and the immune response is prolonged over a much longer period of time. So it's actually much better for you. Aluminum hydroxide isn't aluminum. It's not the same as the thing that you take a beverage, and it's not the same thing. In the same way as sodium chloride isn't sodium or chlorine, both of which will kill you, and you should never eat those. And you eat salt every day, and you have to. So aluminum hydroxide, no indication of any issues with that in a vaccine because it's not aluminum. So that, the whole argument breaks down there. And most vaccines don't even contain it. So when RFK says vaccines are bad because X, and you say, well, X isn't actually in that vaccine, and X hydroxide isn't the same as X anyway, and it's been clinically established as ineffective, in fact, necessary in some instances. So the argument falls apart almost immediately. And what RFK is doing is taking a headline, aluminum associated with neurological disorders, and saying, and drawing a line between these two things, where there is no line between those two things, with vaccines being on that line. So a little bit of information potentially killing a lot of kids for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind was a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
if I said to you, hey, you've got a healthy child, why don't I inject a product containing parts of a dangerous pathogen into said child? Of course you're going to reject that. That's a horrible thing to even consider. That's the little bit of knowledge. The greater part of knowledge is, and if we don't do this, your child has a risk of getting all of these conditions and the neurological damage and or death and organ failure related to those, and potentially passing those conditions on to the next door child and the other kids or your grandmother or whomever. So then, you can see it's not pleasant to have an injection or take a vaccine, but it's a lot less unfortunate to do that. It's a lot less unpleasant to do that than to be part of a pandemic, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, the alternative is a lot less attractive,
Mhm.
honestly.
Yeah.
I know that messaging was so important with COVID vaccine and pediatric vaccine distribution. I had friends
Mhm.
that are pediatricians that had to really work hard with parents to explain how safe it was. I wanted to kind of get your sort of take on what exactly is an RNA vaccine compared to, say, an MMR vaccine for those people who are like, I don't understand. Is this new? Yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of different types of vaccines, all of which are designed to induce a response against a thing that is harmful, normally a pathogen, but it can be against other things like cancer cells. So we're learning how the immune system works and can be tuned to do various things. But let's focus on the infectious disease to begin with. An mRNA vaccine, as you discussed in the introduction, instead of containing parts of the organism, COVID-19, for instance, part of the virus, which we'd call an antigen, normally a protein antigen, this contains mRNA, which encodes the antigen. So instead of administering parts of the pathogen or recombinant aspects of it to the body, the mRNA vaccine gives this signal to our own cells, our own antigen presenting cells, to make part of that virus. And I'm talking about one part of one protein, because not all antigens are created equal. So what that means is the mRNA vaccine convinces your immune system that it has experienced part of an infection. It flags up the pathogen for your immune system and allows both your antibody response and your cell-mediated immune response to be primed, not against the whole thing, but against the most potent or the most significant part of it. And that's how protection happens. I have heard, though, that mRNA can change your genes. That was one of the older things, because ribonucleic acid, yet that relates to genes. But briefly, and I don't mean to make a joke about this really, but mRNA changing your genes is like saying that that music changes the shape of your ears. It's a different kind of language. mRNA in normal metabolism doesn't and cannot reintegrate back into DNA. So RNA vaccines can't mutate yourself, or anyone else for that matter. The strongest side effect that they have is preventing the disease that they're designed to prevent. The nucleic acid technology represents a step forward from old-fashioned protein biochemistry, which is what most modern vaccines are derived from, and is a dramatically cleaner and easier way to produce vaccines at scale very quickly in response to emergent pathogens like this. And again, looking back to the Neolithic and using that as a comparator, in those days, if an emergent pathogen arrived, you're correct, it flared up, killed off a bunch of people, and generally didn't travel too far. But thanks to international travel, rapid international travel, effectively from an epidemiological perspective, we're in one village. It's a big village and it does take time, but it's very difficult for a communicative infection to jump over oceans without people communicating it over oceans. So in fact, we may be a victim of our own success socially, which has impacted the epidemiological environment inevitably. And without the Silk Roads and without international trade, the plague wouldn't have happened either. Or it had happened many times, but stayed exactly where it sprang up.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, there was a plague death up in Lake Tahoe a few days ago, which I have friends in South Lake Tahoe, and I wanted to reach out and be like, "Hey, you guys okay?" Because actually, a good friend of mine who lives in South Lake Tahoe came to Burning Man years ago and had just gotten Zika, and so the whole joke during Burning Man that year was like, "Nobody sleep with Gabe. Don't do it."
No, and these things happen.
Yeah.
You know? But the difference between an outbreak or an individual case and a massive conflagration of infectious disease is contact, travel, and communication. So during the first weeks and months of COVID, you could see that popping up, and it was horrifying to watch, but it wasn't an unexpected thing. And I'll elaborate on that for some of the more conspiracy-minded people. We knew there was going to be a pandemic because pandemics happen. They have always happened. As long as there have been people in communication, there have been diseases spreading around. And we were pretty certain of what kind of pandemic or what kind of organism would cause that, or virus would cause that. And that's due to the nature of the viruses involved. Most people thought it would be an influenza virus because those change very quickly. They're already part of our environment. We've all experienced them. But if an infectious or highly infectious and highly pathogenic one comes along, this can knock out our entire infrastructure, as happened in 1917, 18. Either that or a SARS type virus, which is a coronavirus like COVID-19. And we saw the first sort of inklings of that in the late 90s in Canada, where this started up. And basically, once this type of virus was known and the crossover into people was established, a whole industry of academics set up working on it. And that's one of the reasons we were able to manufacture enough of mRNA vaccines and the other vaccine types that were also available for COVID in enough time to help the people of the world.
Gosh.
So all of that stuff was going on in the background, and to some people's minds it would be, why are you bothering to discuss, a type of virus that hardly ever does this? It's because we knew it definitely can, and it's on a long enough timeline, unlikely events become inevitable events. So I was expecting possibly to live through another influenza pandemic, but it turned out to be COVID. And for the foreseeable future, a COVID vaccine will probably be either co-administered with your influenza vaccine or as a separate thing. And the disease is with us now. Although due to the changes resulting from selective pressure, it's a less potent version of the older one. So that's progress as well.
So with the RNA vaccine, I mean, it's been, as you mentioned, it's been kind of in development since the 90s. So it's been decades.
That technology has been known. It hasn't been
Sure.
rolled
I mean,
out.
not
at
COVID
scale.
specifically. Yeah, that RNA. What is there a possibility of going back and looking at other diseases and trying to develop vaccines that use RNA, mRNA vaccine technology versus the live attenuated version of a vaccine that you see in MMR?
Yeah, there are a bunch of different vaccine types and no reasons why an mRNA approach couldn't be useful for some of them. And it's generally a cleaner and easier technology to work with. And in the past, we've had to either have recombinant versions or attenuated versions, as you mentioned, or killed versions of pathogens. But more recently and more normally, we take a recombinant approach. So we'll clone out a particular antigen that's present on a bacterial or viral pathogen, grow it up in enormous quantities. So we're not working with the pathogen, but still it's a pretty complex and biologically messy process to do that. So conceivably that could happen. Although short term, if we have a good enough and already tested and regulated vaccine for instance, measles or mumps or rubella, there's not a strong driver to reinvent it once the technology is already in place. But again, no reason why not. And to stress this, there still is the requirement for prevention of infectious disease, of course, but we're also getting better at using the immune system to treat chronic disease, and a lot of cancers are becoming not a thing that kills you, but a thing that you can live with over an extended period of time, which isn't to trivialize anyone's struggle with any cancer at any time. So yeah, it's a technology with a lot of potential. It certainly was tested or has been tested extensively over the last decade or so, but it represented a very valuable way by which we could make specific vaccines at quantity and scale, at a quality suitable for human use in a very short amount of time.
I mean, that rollout was I think, very, very impressive.
It really was.
From March 2020 to the December 2020, 2020, right? Because I know that I had physicians getting vaccinated in December, I believe.
And that's what happens when a nation, or largely a group of nations, says, this is what we need, please do it, please make it happen for us. And let's be clear, this happened quickly, but it wasn't rushed. I often hear, oh, it took too short a time to get from A to B. Okay, it took a limited amount of time to do that. The reason it took that limited amount of time is we had significant resources and the cooperation, by which I mean the efficient business practices and time and effort of the FDA and other regulators, which meant that everything else was deprioritized. So the process, instead of taking months to years and lots of discussion back and forward and and really a diplomatic negotiation as well, was fast-tracked. And that's really the only part that was significantly fast-tracked. So if you were working with a COVID product and project, you got priority activity because people were dying.
Yeah. I mean, and this is why stopping any sort of vaccine development here in the United States is so incredibly dangerous, is because, we've got things like avian flu looming, where there's I know that there's vaccines out there for avian flu, but I believe there are none that are safe for human consumption at this point.
Well, I'm uncertain of that, but having any kind of blanket ban on technological development is really problematic and doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense, either economically or scientifically. If America's not developing mRNA technologies, we will. Europe and Canada will just do it. And unfortunately for American institutions, many of your most talented people will go elsewhere. And at the ground level, will it make a big difference in terms of vaccine availability? Maybe not in the short term, but it's unfortunate that we miss out on so much talent from the American environment as a result of this kind of thing. And it had happened before with stem cells. So back, I think it was George Bush Jr. didn't like stem cells,
Probably
or
because
stem cell research.
it's a pro-life situation.
Stem cell research was basically killed at that point, or significantly curtailed, but it didn't stop globally. And now we have things like derived stem cells, where instead of these being bone marrow derived, they are cells that are treated from other parts of the body to generate them back into the stem cell environment. But that's a little bit out of my area. It does seem strange to just say, no, we're not looking at that. That must be evil. I can't understand it. And I wonder who's advising JFK Jr., because there are experts all over the place and he has access to them. So if he's using anti-vaccine and uninformed arguments in general, he has to know that they're incorrect. Which, I mean, are we talking about someone who's actually and demonstrably evil, or so arrogant that they think they know better than a whole community of people and a couple of 100 years of expertise? Or is it, I don't get it. Is he just trolling?
Right? Because sometimes you're wondering, like, is this, like, when Trump got elected, I also thought, is this trolling? Is this what's is this like a big oops surprise? I didn't think I'd get elected. But it's one of those things where the intent and impact don't even really matter at this point. If the intent is evil, or if the intent is, I'm so arrogant, I think I'm right, even though I am poorly misinformed, sorely poorly, all of it. And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. People are dying and people will die. And
I honestly don't think RFK Jr. is an evil person with evil intent. I think he's probably a guy trying to make good decisions and give people good advice. But if that's the case, then he's ignoring all of the expertise that is surrounding him and going off on his own. It would be like me sitting here talking about internal combustion engines.
Mm.
I know they're a thing, and I've got a sort of broad concept of how they work, and I understand various parts of them, but I'm not an expert mechanic, and I couldn't give you advice about your vehicle. So I'm not going to do that. And when the
Right.
expert tells me, I'll listen to that person. But then I'm not a Kennedy. And there's a strong legacy of, both ability and hubris in that family. And he certainly got all of one and none of the other.
I think it's the brainworm. I think the brainworm is just like we're taking down the people. We're taking down. I did a comedy routine recently where I called the brainworm Tim, and that RFK Jr. is effectively a zombie, and Tim is running the show. And Tim wants to just see the fall of the human race, or at least turn us all into zombies through some sort of disease transmission, which so many, I feel like, horror films are rooted in, or even zombie films are rooted in a pandemic.
Yes,
taking
definitely.
over.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And, Walking Dead is a classical example of that. And, the zombies are almost incidental in that show. It's like, this is what happens when your infrastructure breaks. But it's a very, very good analogy, that sort of transmission of pathology and how it impacts our overall culture. I don't understand the man at all. I wish he would shut up, or open a fruit stand, do less damage.
You could open a juice bar just
Exactly,
in Dana
something like
Point,
that.
California, or something.
Yeah, kale
Banana stand.
smoothies or whatever.
Oh dear. Or go bathe in. Did you see him baying in sewage water? His
Yeah, with
family.
the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
Tim, that brainworm. That brainworm is strong.
Mhm.
Brainworm is strong in RFK.
But nobody gets polio, so we don't have to worry about it.
Oh God! Look
Nobody
at
gets
FDR.
polio because
Yeah.
what are the next 10 words?
Right. And we within 100 years we had a president who was wheelchair bound because
Mhm.
of polio. Like, how quickly do we not even 100, like, not, I mean, and I just think of how young we are as a species, and 100 years is such a small, like, a little speck of time, and it's
Yeah,
like
so
within
it's
that.
a couple of lifespans.
But we forget. It's not even we forget, and that's where, yeah, I did a web series years ago called Talking Shit with Dr. Todd and Natalia, and one of the episodes was about anti-vaxxers, and just
Mhm.
about we use the analogy that you use, which is you don't go to a mechanic for doctor advice and vice versa. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
it just doesn't make sense that we are listening to somebody with zero expertise. I mean, that's kind of like why you don't elect a failed businessman to run your country either. Like, I mean, there are a lot of choices being made in the US
Yeah.
that are terrifying. And I think, and it brings me back to that point that earlier when you said it takes a whole team to build a vaccine, and how, like, you don't
Oh, yeah.
have that
Mhm.
American individualism where it's like, I did it all by myself, but it's this idea of, like, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and, like, being,
Mhm.
everybody is this exceptional person, and even people that are not well informed think they can be well informed with a few mommy blogs and
Mhm.
quick Google searches with no peer reviewed evidence. There's this sort of idea that we all can be exceptional. The arrogance of it is pretty terrifying. And I also, before I get too off topic, I did want to bring up, because you brought up something I think is so important, and it is a big misconception with vaccines, including this particular vaccine,
Mhm.
COVID-19, is that COVID vaccine didn't necessarily prevent you getting COVID. It cut down your chance, but it really
Mhm.
was about cutting down death,
Yeah.
and being able to make it manageable. Like you mentioned, like, RNA technology, mRNA technology can help with cancer and make it, maybe not cure it, but, like, make it something that you
Mhm.
can live with. Because a lot of people were like, but wait a minute, I got the COVID vaccine and I still got COVID. Well,
Yeah.
and I would always ask, well, did you end up in the hospital? Are you
Yeah.
still alive?
Yeah. Are
So
you
can you
still
speak to
alive?
that? Yeah.
Evidently. That's true. And this is one of the issues that comes up. No vaccine is perfect. No vaccine can protect 100% of people 100% of the time from the pathogen involved, because people aren't the same. Infectious doses are different, and immune systems function differently as well, all on a continuum. And what a vaccine does is shift that continuum from everyone gets sick and some people die, potentially quite a lot of people die, to hardly anyone gets sick and almost nobody dies across the population. This is particularly relevant to things like COVID and influenza because they change so quickly, because biochemical rules. Please insert, a lecture series here. But having a genome made of RNA rather than DNA and segmented genomes mean that they can change extremely quickly, which means your immune system isn't primed against the version of the virus that's actually circulating. It's one that we think will be circulating. And as a result of that, things like the influenza vaccine vary in terms of efficacy, depending on how closely we get to the epidemic strain. But many people consider a virus to be a fixed entity that doesn't change. It does the same thing over time, and it's not chemically evolving, whereas they all are. So we have to keep up with that as well. And mRNA vaccines, viruses change very, very quickly indeed, due to, well, replication of RNA is lower fidelity than replication of DNA.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So would you say that, I mean, does that mean there's going to be more things like boosters, I guess, for RNA vaccines versus, say, like
Yeah,
an MMR? Because I think that's very
absolutely.
rare. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get a flu vaccine every year. You don't get the same flu vaccine every year, and I use that as a plug-in for most types of circulating viruses. You do that because the virus changes as it works through new populations and recombines, and especially it gets more complex when you're dealing with zoonoses, so animal infections and crossovers, which we've known about for a long, long time. But then you get an atypical type of virus circulating in people, none of which we've seen before, and then you're starting from you're starting from scratch, so you don't have a baseline level of immunity against it. Whereas with flu, you do, because you've seen it, you've had it several times, and so on.
You're aware.
Ideally, though, let's prevent all infectious disease if we can. At the moment, we can't, but we've come a long, long way. And when people talk to me about vaccine hesitancy, I tend to frame it as, okay, it's a valid point. So which of these diseases would you like your child to be at risk from? And then list all of them. And of course, no parent says, I want my child to be at risk of pneumococcal pneumonia, varicella, chickenpox, mumps. And we're also tempted to remember, well, back in my day, in the olden days, I had measles and I'm fine. So why is it not the same now? Yeah, I had measles and I'm fine. But if 1,000 of me had measles, several of us would be dead. It just didn't happen to us most of the time. So it's very, very tempting to see no problem and then don't intervene to prevent what may happen in the future.
Yeah.
Carry on, please.
No, I was going to say, because I have heard people push back or not quite understand what herd immunity is. I actually mentioned it to a friend recently, and they hadn't heard that term. Can you speak a little bit about the importance of herd immunity and what exactly is herd immunity?
It's a really cool concept that I get turned off from, because people aren't herd. We're a community. Although, many of I've been to some sports events where it seems a little bit herd-like.
Yeah.
To illustrate this, fire is a really, really good analogy. Like a forest fire, the kind of thing that can rip through an entire area and just burn everything to the ground. It can only do that because there's fuel for that fire to consume. So if there is no fuel, like a fire break, the fire has to stop at that point. It cannot continue down that path. So the level of damage is reduced. If we consider our herd, our community, to be the fuel for the fire, we are the environment for the pathogen. Vaccines effectively remove fuel from the fire by making individuals in that environment immune. Therefore, they represent a fire break, and it becomes harder the more people that are immune for the disease to spread from one person to another and then jump to another thereafter. And we found that at several different, depending on the condition, percentages in the population, if you have immunity at that level, the disease cannot persist, because from the disease's perspective, instead of a global village of billions of people, now there are just 4 or 5 folks, because the rest are invisible due to their immunological state. It's not a perfect situation, but it's a very much improved situation, especially for those people in our communities for whom vaccines are either unavailable, don't work, or are potentially dangerous. And these are 3 distinct groups. So I don't get a flu vaccine every year to protect myself. Well, I do, but I also get it to protect the elderly people that I interact with, for whom flu is a life-threatening condition rather than an inconvenience. So herd immunity, if enough people in a community have immunity to a condition, that condition cannot continue to circulate within that community. Measles is the classical example. If you get 80% coverage, nobody gets sick. If it drops significantly below that, quite a lot of people do.
And measles is a great example because it is so incredibly contagious.
And everyone got it.
Yeah.
You know, in my primary school class, that was, oh, everyone's got measles. And fortunately, nobody died. There were some people in my peer group who developed neurological issues as a result of that, you know, the other sequelae. And yeah, it was just a miserable time. And you wouldn't want your kid to go through that just as a rite of passage. It doesn't really serve a lot of value, I think.
Yeah. And just a reminder, just only because this happened to my mom, she also, you know, was around and survived measles, and she assumed she had immunity to it. She did not. And so she went and got tested, and they had to go ahead and give her MMR vaccine just to make sure. And it's, you know, just a reminder, it's 95% effective, you know, for 1 dose, 98% for the second, you know, so with those chances, those odds, sounds good. You should do it. Highly recommend.
And the remaining 2%, you know, that area of limited protection, people in that position tend to get measles at a much less significant rate and severity than others as well. So yeah, it works almost perfectly for almost everyone. And it's a really, really effective vaccine. And it's actually the one that, you know, Andrew Wakefield did his horrendous hack job on, and basically brought about hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths as a result of his anti-vaccine position.
Yeah, let's talk about the Wakefield study that got him basically lost his license for this.
Yeah, it was deeply flawed. He was looking at an association between autism and the MMR. It wasn't a double blind in any sense, and it was a grossly biased study that in fact didn't really show anything, and has subsequently, I won't go into great detail on it because it's been retracted as nonsensical. But basically this was a motivated reasoning effort by Wakefield et al. To demonstrate or to develop a view that the MMR was unsafe, and to support a single measles vaccine that Wakefield was involved in the development of. The whole thing was farcical, from the sample size, the number of people involved, the way it was assessed, the subjective and poorly controlled data analysis. The whole thing was an embarrassment from a scientific perspective, and yet it's still cited. And unfortunately, with the conspiracy mindset, if I say, well, yeah, the study that we're discussing was retracted, of course it was, because they're covering up, because he was onto something. And this is the danger of this poor epistemology of the lone genius knows better than everything. So everything you've heard, it's all a lie, because this, you know, the Messiah on the hill. And ironically, it's very often people with religious beliefs who are vulnerable to that kind of mentality. well, it's part of nature, so we'll have to continue with it. And
God's will. A child in Texas recently died because they chose not to give them the MMR vaccine, and the parents insisted they would do it again. They would do it all again, because this is just, that's what was fate, destiny, whatever. But it was only fate because you chose it.
I just can't imagine. I cannot imagine. And maybe giving them more credit than is due. If that was a situation I was in and I was looking at a dead child, I don't think I could admit I was wrong. I think I would have to double down at that point.
Yeah.
Although I would never be at that point, because Jesus Christ, come on, people. Stop burying your children from preventable diseases,
Yeah. And it is interesting, like you mentioned, it's those that are highly religious, but it's also those on the left. Like, so the left and the right, like if there was a Venn diagram of the left and the right, anti-vaxxers would be right in the middle.
Oh yeah,
and
fascinating.
Yeah, because in Los Angeles, the Santa Monica area had a very high rate of anti-vaxxers that were, again, very holistic, new agey type folks that
bless them,
sort of
bless their hearts,
drank the sugar-free, I don't know, kale infused Kool-Aid, that vaccines do in fact cause autism, which we know
never did.
We know that it does not.
No, we looked really, really, really hard over many, many, many years, and there just isn't a causative link there. And I hear in the background, again, the conspiratorial mindset, but autism rates are rising. Well, are they? Or are the rates of autism diagnosis and treatment rising? And again, rates of autism may be rising. Let's assume that they are. That doesn't establish a causative link with anything else. And I thought the autism story was originally about aluminum hydroxide affecting the brain in some way. And most vaccines haven't contained that for 20 years. So are we seeing a difference now? There just isn't any kind of basis to the discussion. And it's not only the religious, you're very correct to say that. The crunchy granola types as well, bless their hearts, and I'm much more aligned with their sort of worldview.
Same.
But a kale smoothie won't stop you getting hepatitis. I'm really sorry. But
it might give you hepatitis, right? Hepatitis A. You could probably, right? Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, and veganism and all of that great stuff. I mean, these are all wonderful things if you want to do these things for yourself. But can we start with letting the kids not die in childhood? It's a
give
really
them a chance.
Start. Yeah, and then let them choose.
Yeah.
But I'm maybe a little atypical in this, but I don't think mandatory vaccines are a thing I support. I'm very much in favor of people being made aware of the risks, having access to the medications involved, and then being allowed to make ideally informed decisions. So I'm very much pro-choice. But equally, the flip side of that is people who are vaccinated and others who cannot be have choice as well. And that choice is to prevent disease vectors from entering our environments. So in the environment here, you have the choice whether to vaccinate your child or not, but your child cannot attend public school unvaccinated, because at that point they're a risk to themselves and others, and that's completely your choice. And I think that's an important thing to maintain, because the last thing I want to do is line people up to administer a product and or vaccine to them that they are unwilling to take. I think that's a heinous thing to do. But making decisions that are potentially deadly for your kids, also a problem. But I can understand it. And all rational parents want their kids to be well and happy. So even the ones who made that terrible decision probably made it thinking that it was a good one. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that any parent would be wanting to do what's best for their child. I mean, not unless it's like Munchausen by proxy or some sort
Mhm.
of something like that. But
Yeah.
which, I mean, I don't know. I've seen some examples of that, but I do know people that I grew up with that actually wanted to move their children out of the state of California so they could send their kids to school unvaccinated. And I worked hard. I tried. I did my best to try
Mhm.
to explain to them the benefits and of having their child vaccinated, not just for themselves, but for the whole herd. And I 1000% agree. I think herd immunity, I, of course, love the concept, but the name, it needs a rebrand. Herd
Yeah.
immunity needs a rebrand. Community immunity community immunity also rhymes.
Yeah.
We could do a theme song.
Yeah.
Community
And,
immunity. Yeah. I mean, but like, because herd,
and
we think of sheep. And like in the US, you don't want to be called a sheep because it might get
conceptually,
shagged
though,
by the Scots.
yeah,
Huh?
conceptually, though, it's absolutely
Absolutely.
it's a perfect analogy. Penn and Teller actually did a really good illustration of this, where they had little red people set up in a big area and a pendulum with influenza or virus on it, and they swung the pendulum down, and someone got hit, and then there was a sort of chain of dominoes that fell over, and other people got hit, and then they removed 50% of the folks and swung the pendulum again, and the damage was dramatically lower. And that's really it. um, and there are the things like hepatitis A, B, and C that people don't generally consider as vaccine preventable, but those are as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we no longer really have to manage actively if immunological intervention is available. So I think that's big progress, and we're getting better at it, which is also good.
Yeah. People need to start playing the Oregon Trail again because I feel like I
Oh
don't.
yeah,
Did you ever play the Oregon Trail?
that isn't that the one where you almost always die of dysentery or
Yes,
typhoid.
typhus, typhoid, all the thing, but it's just that
Mhm.
you really learn how I don't know if influenza was one of them, but I mean, I think people don't realize, and again, when I was teaching at Lehman College in the Bronx. I got hired in January 2020, and my students had a finger on the pulse of what was going on, and they kept coming and asking questions about COVID or coronavirus or just any sort of pathogen. They were really concerned because a lot of them lived in multi-generational households. They lived with
Mhm.
grandparents. They were essential workers. And so we did an last minute emergency emerging disease lecture. And I remember I did it on February 28th, 2020. But I got to go through things like Spanish flu,
Mhm.
which is essentially influenza, something that you think is pretty sort of benign, not a big deal, and how it wiped out a huge swath of the U.S. and a European uh, population, and
Yeah.
how
and
absolute.
and the ironic timing of it, if I may. And we were just working through what had been the most deadly war that we could come up with at the time, and influenza was like, hold my beer.
Yeah.
I know it's not funny, but it kind of is. That we worked hard over 4 years to murder as many kids as we could, and then 50 to 100 million were killed. 50 million to 100 million people. So that's 1 in 3 of everyone in America, as an example, except that was the global number, but it was vast and it ripped through entire populations. And
Good Black
yeah,
Plague to shame, right? Black Death was nothing compared to that number.
well, the Black Death at the
I mean,
time,
during the 14th century, at
mhm,
least.
it was lower numerically, but more impactful sociologically. At that point, the Black Death basically transformed the entire European culture because workers suddenly became rare and valuable, and property began to funnel into bigger piles because your whole family was dead. Therefore, one person got all of the stuff. And we moved away from feudalism at that point. But that's why infectious diseases are always part of our environment and shape our culture as we progress forward. HIV, for instance,
Yeah.
an enormous influence as well, and another pandemic that is substantially controlled now.
Yeah. I mean, I know that it reminds me of what you mentioned about are there more autistic people? But people are saying, why are there not? There's a big bulk of the gay population that's missing.
Yeah.
And in the US, and like, where are our elder gays? And people forget that many died.
Yeah.
Many died in silence because people did not want to treat homosexuals or a disease that was deemed even though it has nothing to do with sexuality, just its risk factors. But yeah, I mean, it's terrible.
Let's see, I was 8 years old when the Thatcher government in the UK sent out the HIV/AIDS pamphlet, which was useful. They were making an effort, but it was definitely saying males who have sex with males and IV drug users are the major groups, which was true and accurate at that time, but incomplete in a global sense.
Sure.
In the Western world, yeah, absolutely, that's the case, in most of it anyway. But globally, HIV was a heterosexual disease experienced by non-drug users.
Yeah.
But we just saw a little part of it over here. And yeah, the stigma was enormous, even, for 20, 30 years after that initial sort of public awareness began. And you're right, there's an entire cadre of the population that's gone, because at that time everyone died.
Yeah.
Within 3 to 5 years. But that's no longer the case, because smart people in labs working, making stuff. So when, again, to look back to RFK Jr., when an idiot says all of this big slice of science is verboten, they're not talking about science, and they're definitely not talking about medicine. They're talking about phobia, particularly their own, and or some other kind of weird, perverted power dynamic. Because the biological world doesn't care about denial. You can pretend all you like. Virology doesn't care. And I struggle with this, and it confuses me. If you had to come up with someone to be in RFK's position, how could you come up with someone worse than him?
You
I mean, think of
can't.
someone
Jenny
random.
McCarthy could have been
John Bon Jovi would be great compared.
amazing.
It'd be awesome, right?
Fantastic
Anybody.
hair style. Yeah.
And he would say, I don't know anything about this. Here's an expert who does. That's all that's necessary.
Yeah. I mean, and when you mentioned the social aspect too, what I think we forget is how dastardly really it is, because who is at the most risk when it comes to pandemics? Who are the people that are most likely to die? The
The
poor.
old, the very old, the very young, the very poor. Always.
And yeah, it's always, and the poor. I mean, that puts you, because you're living in multi-generational homes, so that means old people living with young people. You've got people that are on the front lines, essential workers. And so
Well,
it's
tuberculosis in the Victorian era is the classical example of this. Wealthy people got it, but poor people basically lived with it constantly, throughout the entire populace. So you're right. And for COVID, there are big areas of the world where we'll never know what the impact was. So on the map you put up, which was excellent, there's a whole bunch of area, or a whole bunch of the world, maybe half the world, where we have some information, but we don't have hard numbers. But we did very well this time. And it was, could have been dramatically worse in all kinds of different ways. But again, I can't come up with anyone worse than RFK in this position, except perhaps Trump with his.
Trump, yeah.
Could we put the light in the body and do a kind of cleaning?
Right. Oh my God. Let's inject ourselves with a disinfectant, some Windex, little Windex in the old veins.
Ivermectin.
Oh yeah.
And here's the president of the United States, arguably the most powerful man in the world, with the biggest, media footprint you could ever imagine. And
Smallest hands, biggest media footprint.
Randomly spouting out, this is good and it's probably better than that. And you just killed thousands of people. And you don't care. It's just
blood.
Completely doesn't care. And unfortunately, I don't think he'll ever be held accountable for that, because there's so many other horrific things he's done. But to me, that was the banality of evil. He didn't necessarily know he was being evil, but he didn't care enough to work out that he was. He didn't care enough to say, I'm not going to open my mouth here until I know something to tell you. And maybe he's just like, well, people make their own decisions. They'll live, they'll die. You know, people are saying this, people are saying that. But this guy got up day after day and did that. And I know for a fact that folks were saying to him, this is having an impact and people are going to suffer for it. Tony Fauci, for instance, would have definitely said, you know what you said there, if people follow your advice, there's going to be a body count associated with it. But we made it through, and unfortunately he's still in that position. But thankfully we're not dealing with, you know, another pandemic at the moment.
At the moment. Yeah.
Sorry,
Go on. I had a feeling.
I was done. I was getting too political, and it's not appropriate for me. But it makes me angry when people do that kind of thing.
It's because blood is on their hands. Anytime orders like this are made, like blood, like literally, they are sealing the deaths of thousands, if not millions, of people. You know, it's not. This is not being facetious. This is not just being like. It's kind of like, I mean, honestly, in 2015, 2016, I remember marching against when Trump first got elected, calling him a fascist, and people thought we were. They told us we were crazy. Even like people on the left were like, you got to give him a chance. And it's and now, as the democracy has been chipped away, and we are literally now living in what is probably, and I hate to even say this, as close as a fascist regime as the US has ever experienced.
Oh, undeniably so. Yeah.
And Michael, because I have so many questions, but I do want to ask, because you know, I was just in the UK during June. And I know that a lot, and this is right when the ICE raids were starting and really picking up here in Los Angeles, and everybody and I had to make it very clear anytime I met somebody there in England or Wales that I did not approve. I did not like this. I hated this. But I'm just curious, what is, because you've lived all over the world, you know, and most recently in the Netherlands and now Scotland. What is the response from your friends, family, colleagues to what's happening in the US?
They're collectively horrified by it, in large part because, well, here's an important fact. When fascist regimes take power, they never announce it. There isn't welcome to fascism day. All your freedoms are fucked. You know, they don't do that. It's incremental. And in the European environment, we've seen this a couple of times at least, and once within the last 100 years. And it's really, really obvious. And it's something that we pay close attention to for obvious reasons. Nazis.
Nazis.
Yeah. And living in Leiden, in the Netherlands, you know, it's impossible to walk through the town without being aware that it was invaded, decimated, massacred, bombed within, you know, a couple of generations of our timeline. So when we see things like people of a particular group being herded into camps and or prisons and denied due process, all of the red flags go up. And alarmingly, none of it's surprising, because Trump was very open about being both an imbecile and a power-hungry, crazed maniac. And now he's surrounded himself by all manner of douchebags. And Stephen Miller is the one that really gives me the creeps. He gives me the absolute willies, because I think he's unashamedly exactly what he projects. That he's an unashamed fascist, completely unapologetic.
Racist, openly white supremacist, openly. Just.
So yeah, but I have great hope and a lot of faith in America and the American people as an energetic, youthful populace who can reinvent themselves, because it's what you guys do, and you do it better than any other country I've ever seen. There's so much potential and energy and positivity there. And I think your humanity is much more stable than the fascism that has been basically parachuted in to co-opt your resources. I think it will change, and I think it will change back, and I hope it changes back very quickly. And we're not out of the woods yet. put it that way.
No, I do worry because it is a perfect storm in terms of what RFK is doing and halting RNA vaccine research, also gutting healthcare,
That was
gutting,
extraordinary. Yes.
yeah, education. I mean, it's basically setting up the perfect storm for a lot of people to die because they will not have the infrastructure to support so many sick people. The education, so people get vaccinated. Even the access to vaccines, which that actually is one of my biggest fears, is them pulling vaccines and us having to go across the border to try to get them, which is bonkers to me.
Oh, it really is. I mean, the USA as a country is conceptually difficult for me because it's a continent with
Right. We're huge.
with vast differences between New Hampshire and Kentucky and Arkansas, and enormous disparity of wealth and opportunity across there. But no child in the US needs to go short of disease preventing vaccines economically if you want that to be a reality. But
Yeah.
then nobody in the US needs to go short of healthcare if you want that to be a reality.
Or food. I mean, like
Exactly.
there are a lot of hungry kids. Like they actually, I mean, again, I don't want to get too off topic, but like, the GOP is the king of like gutting any sort of welfare or, free lunch for kids at school, but saying they're pro life. How are you pro life if you're not pro child and child's health, child's hunger, child's education? It's
And in terms of these interventions, they may sound small, but we know that these things help enormously in 5, 10, 15 years. Well-nourished children are more easily educated and better behaved. So even at that level, you've got fewer criminal developments going on, all kinds of things. But if you're running your education system as a for-profit industry, it's not going to work.
just like our prisons.
That's not how or your healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're all for profit, healthcare, prisons, education. It's, we're a shining example of late stage capitalism that is about to.
Well, I mean, there are instabilities to it for sure.
Yeah.
And I'll look back to my favorite economic term, commonwealth, where I don't mind paying taxes because of what those taxes fund. And it's reasonable infrastructure and schools and education and defense and so on. And when you do the sums, the money's there. It's just not being targeted towards those things because someone is making a big profit out of keeping people sick. I mean, we have the National Health Service here, which is equivalent to most of Europe in that it's free at the point of contact. And that was a commitment made by the government after the Second World War. Basically, we've all done well. We've all saved this. Nobody needs to starve to go to the doctor now. And although it's an expensive thing, and yes, our tax money pays into it, I can't imagine a more effective stimulus to a culture than nobody ever going bankrupt due to medical expenses.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And again, just because we decided that was a priority, not because we're an incredibly rich country or anything like that. We're not. We just said, this is what we want to do. And well, one thing to think about, I think the US now spends 26 times, or no, they spend as much on defense as the next 26 countries.
Nations?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
And I think like 19 or 20 of those nations are allies to the US anyway. So
It doesn't.
I don't understand.
No, it doesn't make any sense. And I mean, yeah, the healthcare system here is been broken for a long time. My mom actually taught health sciences and nurses going back to school to become administrators. And so she always had to be on top of what was happening. And years ago, when I was 25, I got hit by a truck as a pedestrian on the shoulder of the freeway. And I lost my insurance months before because I was an actress and I had it through SAG, and they had raised the minimum to qualify for insurance, and which has only risen and risen and risen to the point where no actor really can get it unless they're doing really well. But point being, I almost I was in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt for a few years, because of
That's horrifying.
I was in the hospital on and off for 3 weeks, and I was really messed up. And but also what happens, and you probably are aware of this, is the way that the healthcare system works is the insurance, if you are uninsured, your bill will be $200,000. But if you're an insurance company, your bill will be $20,000. So they jack it up for the individual that is uninsured. I mean, it makes no sense. And so, now what's happening here in the US, I really do worry, because I've even gotten messages from my healthcare provider I do through Marketplace, where I get a subsidiary from the state of California because I don't make a ton of money to help pay for my health insurance. But they've warned that it might go up a lot come the new year, and so I'm kind of panicking because, I mean, I know what it's like to be an uninsured person and get gravely injured. And nobody should, and like you said, nobody should have to worry. Nobody should have to lose their life, everything.
If you're experiencing a health crisis, you don't want to lose your house as well, necessarily.
Yeah, you don't want to think about that.
And although it goes against the capitalist grain of sort of, stuff for free, it's not for free. We all pay for it.
Yeah.
I pay more for it than people with no income. So maybe I should feel bad about that, but I kind of don't, because everyone benefits. A healthier populace isn't just an individual benefit.
I mean, it's kind of like the herd immunity idea. Like, we all benefit if we're all healthy. Like, we're all a bunch of hangry, hungry, sick people. We're going to be just a miserable population. So wouldn't you? And that's where I think the disparity of wealth here in the US is really interesting. It's almost like they did not learn about the French Revolution in school. But yeah, because it's like the working class is the middle class is non-existent here now. Everybody is just it's this completely polarized rich versus poor. And anyways, gone down that rabbit hole. I wanted, because I've got you, and because I just know that this would be a great little resource that I'm hoping to chunk up, is you've already kind of debunked some of the things that people say about RNA vaccines, but I just want to go through a couple of them. If you want to
that's the fun part. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's
RNA
do it. Okay.
and other vaccines. And before we get into it, I should say, if I could make a vaccine that turned people into cyborgs, I probably would.
Okay, let's go.
I would do it just for fun, but I remember the microchips in vaccines, because Bill Gates wants to do something rapture.
Some 5G thing, right? What's I got that. I met an anti-vaxxer actually in the UK who was lovely, but had some pretty out there, like the typical 5G, autism, all the, and I hit them with all the things. Like, again, like, more people are getting diagnosed with autism because the diagnostic is better, and it's a spectrum, and we're all kind of there or on a spectrum. And
but you would say that, you corporate shill. That when the conspiratorial mindset sees an absence of data and conflates absence with presence of compelling evidence, you can't help. There's no fixing that. Yeah. Of course, there isn't any information about my proposed weird idea. They have hidden it. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but absence of evidence is definitely not evidence of presence.
Yes. When I hosted a Bigfoot show, I would have to say, because people would always come at me with Bigfoot theories, and I would say, well, the absence of evidence is not evidence that it doesn't exist. However, the probability is directly adjacent to zero.
Yeah. If them Bigfoots did exist, what would we see? Have we? You're right. I can't disprove leprechauns, but I still don't think leprechauns are real. But you wanted to go in. go into a
sorry.
couple of the
Yes.
additional anti-vax ones?
Well, I'm gonna just do like I'll probably cover some of the ones we already said, but let's see. Oh, okay, just real quickly, only because I know you mentioned this, but you already know this. So we're gonna do RNA vaccine myths. Do RNA vaccines change your DNA?
No, not possible. mRNA is chemically distinct from DNA. They are related types of molecules, but they're not interchangeable. mRNA is what your body makes to send from your genetic material a signal to your protein manufacturing areas to make stuff. So mRNA cannot mutate you into an X-Man, a Pegasus, or anything else like that. Sorry.
Damn it. I'm
Yeah.
so disappointed. Okay, mRNA sounds pretty nice. Okay, so are mRNA vaccines new?
Comparatively new in that they're not the classical type of vaccine, which was basically a big gold messed up gamish of knackered pathogen. So the technology is relatively new. The overall concept of mRNA as a vaccine isn't particularly new.
Copy that. Do mRNA vaccines give you the disease you are trying to fight?
No, that isn't possible. Because the mRNA vaccine does not contain, nor has it ever contained, an intact COVID virus, which would be required to cause the condition you're discussing. What a vaccine will do, if it works, is make you a little bit poorly and maybe a little bit feverish and a bit shivery, because that's your immune system responding to the stuff in the vaccine. So that's like the 1% symptoms that you might get if you were naturally infected.
Copy that. Okay. Let's see. Do RNA vaccines make you magnetic?
No,
I mean, you are pretty magnetic,
no,
I will say.
they. How would they make you magnetic? How would they?
I don't know.
The answer
Do
is
they give you
no.
5G? No?
There is no mode of action I can imagine that would cause that. Have people claimed that?
No, I actually I did see one thing that said magnetic, and I was like, "That's insane." I had to ask
Oh,
because
that's
it's
brilliant.
so. But I
No,
also, you know, hmm.
but
uh,
the 5G involvement was another weird thing. Is like I can't understand this potential mode of action that they're talking about. But are the 5G people the same people that see like
chemtrails.
chemtrails in the sky? And,
Yeah,
yeah. Mhm.
yeah. I mean, if they can make me better than my phone, if it gives the five is like the five, like, can I be used as a telephone if I get the RNA vaccine? Because the 5G.
Yes, absolutely, you can.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I love thanks for playing along.
No.
Do vaccines, any vaccines, cause autism?
Not that we've ever been able to find, and we've looked really, really carefully because people were very concerned about it. And when things like that crop up, as they do from time to time, the vaccine developers and manufacturers are the people who look into this kind of stuff, because we don't want to make bad products or products that hurt people, because that's the opposite of what we're about.
Right?
So this is a thing that we actually do take really, really seriously, and the entire industry did. No, vaccines have no causative link to autism. Autism diagnoses happen at an increased frequency now because we understand the conditions, the spectrum of conditions, much more effectively than we did 10, 20, 30, or 40 years ago. I mean, there were no autism diagnoses 100 years ago. Does that mean there were no autistic kids 100 years ago? No,
Yep.
it doesn't mean that. It means we had other labels that we attached to people, and it was much easier just to ignore small populations of folks who were differently functional. So no, no autism there, and hopefully, well, in fact, the young parents that I know are aware of this, and they know the risks associated with measles, mumps, rubella, and the other things as being much, much more significant than, well, anything that came from Wakefield's work.
Yeah. What is your favorite thing about RNA vaccines?
that you can synthesize them chemically without complex bioreactors.
Ooh.
Because normally you've got to grow a bunch of stuff and it can be hundreds of thousands of liters. And then there's a complex purification and processing that gets you from the original mix to an actual product. And that's where most of the complexity creeps in and most of the risk. So it's a much cleaner, faster process, and it can be standardized from essentially from beginning to end, such that you don't need to reinvent a complex manufacturing process to change your product. So versatility, rapidity, quality of product, and ease of manufacture, these are all factors. And yeah, it may be adaptable to other conditions as well. We won't see an abolition of all the other classical vaccines for generations, but conceivably we could go down that route. Are they perfect? No, not at all. Are any medical products or interventions perfect? No, because that's not possible. Are they advantageous over other avenues, other techniques? Potentially, yes. And in terms of evidence, well, we, for the first time in our species history, actively managed and controlled a pandemic in real time through our understanding of the pathogen involved at the molecular level. We've never been even close to that before. During the Black Death, we were looking at miasmas and demons and prayers and all of that stuff. A lot of hocus pocus with a lot of good intention behind it. And now we're saying, yes, this particular epitope on this particular protein must be conserved in all the variants in order to maintain infectivity. And we're not guessing about that. So it's remarkable. And as a species, I think we've done great. We've done incredible things in a really short time. And I hope that we survive long enough to continue with that process.
Oh, God, that is fascinating to think that this is the first one we really were able to identify and sort of contain. Because
Mhm.
I was trying to find a real clear number of, I think it's 100 million cases of COVID in the US. And I think 1 million deaths was like the closest number I was getting to. But I was just like,
Yeah.
that is
It's
amazing.
thereabouts. Yeah.
You
And
know,
that's still an enormous number of people, you know. Unfortunately, the way that these things work is the mortality rate associated with this kind of disease might be 1 or 2% over the entire population. But that's a misrepresentation. What it really means is almost everyone over 65 and almost everyone under 3, you know, is really where it tends to hit. Not all the time, but you know, in the situation of COVID, that was very much what was going on, and it was ripping through populations of elderly folks and basically wiping them out. Thankfully, we're not there now, and we made it through. But many countries reached the situation where their medical infrastructure was at the point of collapse because there weren't enough doctors and nurses and people picking up the garbage and cops and pilots and bus drivers. And pretty soon, when you lose enough of these people across your entire culture, everything stops working. And once you lose control of that, it gets bad pretty fast. It hasn't happened like that in Europe and North America for quite a long time, but we're not that far away from it. And these kind of crises creep up and can quickly launch us into something like that if they're not managed effectively. Unfortunately, though, they also bring up the hysterics who are like, no, it's demons, it's the end. I mean, did the Jehovah's Witnesses, I think they said this was the ultimate end or the beginning of it's confusing because there's a rapture every Tuesday, you know.
yeah, I mean, you can't keep up, right? There's always like the end of the world is nigh. Yeah. Oh no. Oh no. I love when I have a thought. I had a good question. It was coming and then it just exited my brain.
No,
I'm going to
don't worry.
blame demons. Oh, yeah. Okay. Speaking of, you know, just the infrastructure.
Mhm.
We talked last week Yeah, folks at home, we actually were going to do this last week, but we had to do it over again because we had issues. But we had an amazing talk last week where you did go through this idea of like a zombie movie where, you know, say like a Walking Dead or The Last of Us, where there, you know, could be a pandemic, everything sort of, the infrastructure just collapses and it becomes utter chaos. You kind of had a timeline in which that could happen.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It depends on a lot of variables in a society, but we're really talking about weeks at that point, and not very many weeks. So in emergency planning, if you lose, say, 30% of your population either incapacitated or dead, that's a third of your lifting power gone. And when things like fresh water, electricity, garbage collection are pivotal to the health of the environment and the people in it, as soon as those things start to disappear, then progressively you get into a more dangerous environment. And weeks is really the amount of time you have before that happens.
Wow.
Fortunately, we're very well resourced in this part of the world, and it's further away in most instances. But imagine, for instance, if only one thing was different in the US. Imagine that you didn't have electricity for 10 days
Oof.
and what that would do. I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about, does it? Even a 1-day electricity cut across the entire nation. So
Because that
very,
would mean no internet, right? Because at the core,
yeah, traffic lights, things like that,
refrigeration.
refrigeration, the whole deal. So if you take one piece of that structure away, very quickly things get difficult. And if you're in a resource restricted environment already, then there are fewer extra pieces you can use to fill the gaps if you don't have those resources. So yeah, it's I think we did very well, and I was very excited that we managed as well as we did in the pandemic. And I'm glad, sounds terrible, but I'm glad it happened at a time when I was actually in my career and I could be involved and do something about it. Because as soon as you start learning about virology, you begin to go, oh shit, this is going to happen. This is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And and it's never good when it does. But we were ready this time, or more ready than we have been in the past.
Yeah. And that's, again, why we can't stop. We got to keep doing the research. That's why, like, we need to keep going. So can you tell me a little bit about your role during COVID, if you have some time?
Yes. And I'm conscious that we're approaching sort of timelines there. I was working as an independent consultant, and at the time I was helping set up a cell and gene therapy business for a company in the Netherlands. During the pandemic, though, myself and others in the industry were basically pulled out of where we were and asked to contribute to other companies to assist in taking what technology they have and scaling it up to the scale that was required, which was, quite frankly, make enough for everyone in the world.
Wow.
With nobody left out.
Which is great, but
make
a lot.
it happen. Make it happen. So orders of magnitude bigger than previous. And my involvement in that was various across a number of companies, but essentially, in order to release a medicine to the public, you have to be able to analyze it very carefully and properly and know exactly how stringent those analytics are. And you also need that to be able to control your manufacturing process. So I was largely involved in analytical development and quality control development, so that we could say, yes, this product is what we say it is. We can prove how potent it is. We can prove how stable it is. We can transport it. And critically, we can make enough of it for everyone. And with different types of vaccine, there were different types of challenge. So I went around and worked for multiple different ones during that time. And it was great fun. Although it did feel a lot like, I imagine, a war feels. You know, it's exciting and there's a lot of energy there and there's a lot of resources tied up in it. But in the back of your mind, you're going, yeah, we're doing this because people are actually dying now, right now. so it's very humbling to, both get involved in that kind of work and, contribute even a minor piece to a much bigger collective whole. Because as I mentioned before, no one person invents a technology or a product. It's a culmination of.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Peter, can you hear me? Ian, can you hear me?
I can
Uh-oh.
hear you. Ian froze. I'm not
Okay.
sure what happened.
I love how he talks with his hands. Please hold, folks of the internet. Uh-oh, that's Scottish internet, man. Is it happening? Is this where the electricity goes out for the day and we all end up dying in a few weeks? Just kidding. No hysteria. No mass hysteria. Dogs and cats living together. Okay, folks, I'll give it a minute. I wonder if...
Yeah, Ian might want to refresh the page. That might help.
Okay. Do you have
If Ian can still hear us, I'll check with him on Facebook. Okay.
Oh,
No,
I think, yeah.
he
I
heard.
think it looks like he might be. Yeah. Anyways, folks, I hope you're enjoying this conversation. This is so much fun. I love talking to Ian. It's tough because I have a million questions and I don't know if I have any questions in the chat, but if you are watching this after I've recorded, please feel free to send me questions or put them in the comments and I can relay them to Ian because he is fantastic at breaking this all down. And he even said before the show, if he doesn't know something, he'll say, I don't know, but he knows everything. But I do think it's really important. One of the things he did bring up when he talked about the cascade of like, if we pulled one thing like electricity out of the infrastructure, that it would also be other diseases that could pop up. Like if the water got, if there was, not proper water sanitation, you could have a cholera outbreak. Oh, hi. Hello.
Sorry.
Welcome
Yeah.
back.
I think ICE raided my internet hub.
Mother
and
fuckers.
they're probably coming for me right now.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, they went across the pond. They're intrepid and dare I say just idiotic. Well, welcome back.
Yeah, and it's been a great deal of fun speaking with you about this, and it's a good time to do it, and hopefully we'll make a bit of an impact and
I hope
vaccines will be less terrifying. I want to be clear though that anybody who is afraid of this kind of thing, they're probably afraid for good reasons or reasons that are good and completely valid to them, and I respect that very much. What I don't respect is resistance to learning and a resistance to actual information that is potentially helpful and life-saving to folks. So it's where I get a little upset about it, especially when they're making life and or potentially life and death decisions for third parties like kids. That's a problem for me.
Exactly. Policy or even parents that, they are the policymakers of a household, right?
Mhm.
So I think I never want to talk down to people who have questions about science because it really is just a matter of just learning. And that's
Absolutely.
again, but it's about being, like you said, open
Yeah.
to gaining new data, taking it and, reformulating maybe perhaps your ideas, but the resistance or, like you said, just constantly moving the goalpost when having conversations with anti-vaxxers is tough. But I do think people should be asking questions. I don't think people blindly should be taking anything into their body, whether it's food, drink, or medicine.
Completely
But
agreed.
I always encourage friends that send me things to do a quick Google search and always to look for peer-reviewed articles rather than articles that look like they're from journals that were just kind of fabricated in a day. And,
But even that's quite challenging
yeah.
now, as a number of anti-science organizations have basically founded their own journals that look a lot like academic journals, but aren't academic
Do you have any
journals.
examples
The
that
Journal
you...
of Creation Research,
Oh,
which isn't a journal and isn't about research. It's
no.
an embarrassing anachronism where people's preconceived ideas about Jesus and such like are written up like biological science papers, and it's incredibly embarrassing and intentionally misleading to their audience,
Yeah.
because they're basically saying, look, it's the same. These are comparable and we're right, of course, except what they're presenting is absurd idiocy. Again, presented by people who know enough to know that they're being dishonest.
That's the scary part. Like we were talking about the impact and intent, and is this people acting out of a purely willfully ignorant,
Mhm.
they know they're wrong, but and you got to wonder, like, are they a little evil? Like what do they stand to gain by killing their constituents or their followers or their,
I
or keeping them sick? I don't know.
I think it's probably an indication of good mental health to be confused by that, because I can't make it make sense either.
Yeah.
In From a purely ethical point of view, it'd be like,
Right.
well, if I don't understand this, and yeah, it really bothers me. And as a much younger man, it was really infuriating when you'd see this being presented as legitimate science. But
Fact. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's what I mean. Even on the left during COVID, it was troubling because you had maybe poor, uneducated people on the right that were really resistant to getting the vaccine, and we're like, we're trying to help you. We are taking it, and we want you to take it because we don't want you to die. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
why would we want you to take something for you to live if we thought that we don't benefit at all? We
yeah,
have to make more
exactly.
of this stuff now, right? But we also don't. We could benefit because, of course, the herd immunity. But at the same time, if they're living in areas of the world where there
Yeah.
aren't, where it's predominantly red. But yeah, it does, it's like a make it make sense moment
Mhm.
that if anybody watching has your own thoughts, feel free to share them. I'm all about it.
Yeah, it does confuse me, and it is upsetting. But at the end of the day, most of the folks who were interested in staying well were able to manage their own health and survive and get through it. Unfortunately, of course, the tragedies of daily loss are unconscionable. And for much of the time, or for a period of time during COVID, the US was losing people at 9/11 rates on a daily basis.
It was
Um,
troubling. Yeah.
uh, but yes, we got through it, and hopefully we've learned from it. And just because it's no longer the pandemic, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be vaccinated for COVID in the fall. You should
Yes.
absolutely do that. I will be. So will my elderly father, who came through it without any issues, and keep looking
Bless
after
them.
each other and ourselves. And a global pandemic has one advantage, I think, and it's kind of a leveler. It doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Gentile or an Arab or wherever you're from or what language you speak. You know, virology is equal opportunities. Pandemics don't respect ethnic boundaries or geographical boundaries or cultural boundaries, equal opportunities. And it kind of indicates that we're all in the same tribe, and the rest of the stuff that keeps us separate and fighting and yelling at each other is just like the clothes we choose to put on top of our humanity. At least that's the way I see it. You can dress it up in all different kinds of things, but when it comes down to it, we're all neighbors. So behave accordingly. Let's stop killing each other for no reason.
I think that's a great point. And I also think, yeah, just remembering who are the people telling you not to get vaccinated, and are they getting vaccinated themselves?
I mean, that's
you know so remember the
yeah.
source, the
Although
source.
if it's RFK Jr., he probably isn't. And I imagine him sitting in a
Brainworm.
tinfoil teepee in order to gather orgons from the atmosphere or some other bollocks. And
Or
do you,
sun tanning his butthole, like we
I
talked about last week.
no, that's Carlson.
It's Carlson. No, but I feel like
Yeah,
Carlson and him
yeah.
probably exchange notes. You know what I mean? Tucker's pucker and him have some sort of
Oh,
butthole pact.
but I
Not
guess
that kind of butthole, but yeah.
RFK, you got to give him some credit because he's made so much out of having a famous uncle that credit where it's due.
And his dad.
Those guys had talent,
Yeah.
lots of talent there. Not so much with this douche though.
No. I did want to ask, because we're wrapping it up, but in terms of the next pandemic, do you have any thoughts on what that could be and what maybe your suggestions would be moving forward?
Yep. My thoughts on the next pandemic are the same as my thoughts on the previous one. Based on the virology and the way these viruses change over time, a coronavirus or an influenza virus is most likely the one that's going to do it. And stay vaccinated against influenza. And even if a weird one comes up that is more powerful than the ones we've experienced, you'll have at least a background of reactive immunity to it. It's conceivable that a virus of the Ebola type could be involved as well. But here's another thing about epidemiology. If a virus is spectacularly pathogenic, it tends to be pathogenic quickly in a place and then die out. So it's difficult for Ebola, for instance, to spread all the way around the world before the intensity of that infectious fire dies down. So with that, probably influenza.
Okay.
Which was what I would have bet on that to begin with anyway.
Yeah, no, with Ebola, I've had friends that have been in Liberia during, I think it was the 2015 Ebola outbreak, but I mean, and the mortality rate for Ebola is it 70%? It's something
at least.
At least. I mean, it's as a primatologist, a group of Western lowland gorillas contracted Ebola in this group, and it just decimated, and of course the human population. But now there is an Ebola vaccine, correct?
Yes, and yes, that is correct. I was getting dragged into thinking about different pathologies in different animal species, which is a whole thing as well.
Oh, the viral spillover is fascinating.
Yeah. So yes, influenza has been the one that has caused us most problems over history in terms of pandemic effects, and is likely to continue to be so. But it's also relatively controllable. So coronaviruses and influenza are what I'd watch out for. Oh. But in the meantime, keep, covering your mouth when you sneeze and wash your hands more often than you think you have to, and you'll probably be okay.
Also, for those that say that COVID was created in a Chinese lab, which drives me absolutely bonkers, because we all know that not we all know, that's a silly statement, but those in the know that viral spillover from zoonotic diseases, animals to humans, is quite common, including SIV to HIV. What would you say to somebody that said that coronavirus or COVID-19 was created in a lab?
Show me any data to support that, because I've not seen any, and it's another one of those reactions that folks not involved in virology tend to have. Oh, it's a new virus. Where did it come from? Someone must have made it. Which is an analog to religious thinking as well. Here's a thing we don't understand. Someone must have created it. But in terms of where new viruses come from, we know about this. We know that some viruses can jump from species to species. Influenza is the classical case. Some parts of influenza can jump from species, birds into pigs, from pigs into people. And this is a known thing since we started coming into contact with wildlife. SIV and HIV. SIV is a chronic disease. SIV is a chronic disease in chimps. The retroviral cousin of it is HIV, which is a disease in people. Developed via blood-to-blood contact through hunting and butchering.
Not sex, as people used to spread. No. I always have to, they're like, that's because we were screwing monkeys. And I was, nope, it's bushmeat consumption.
Bushmeat consumption, which is really, really common in most of the world that isn't the Western developed world. You'll eat whatever you get.
Absolutely. And you
Um,
can't be mad at it. That's the cultural relativism is real, but it's just education is where you can combat that.
Yeah. Okay. So this has been a great deal of fun, and thank you for the invitation to appear.
Thank you so much. And did you have anything, any place where people can find you in the world?
I'm actually a little bit undercover at the moment because I've transitioned from that part of my career into doing something else. So I'm less online. I guess if people do have questions, they can put them in the chat or in the comments on this when it's posted, and I'll pay attention to that and respond accordingly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ian Boulton, coming to you
my
live
pleasure.
from Scotland. I very much, oops, I accidentally moved my page over. There we go. I am so thankful for this. This was, I think, going to be a great resource for folks that don't quite understand what RNA vaccines are. So, and one last thing. What's the filthiest thing you've ever done for science?
I had to I had to blend in a wearing blender a placenta, and that's a gross thing to do.
Whose placenta was this?
I wasn't allowed to know, but it was
a human placenta?
Yeah, donated tissue, and I was deriving transferrin receptor from it. So old-fashioned biochemistry before we did anything cool with recombinants.
That's so cool, though.
It's pretty gross, though.
Yeah, at least you didn't make a smoothie out of it. Okay,
Oh, that's true.
That's horrifying. So folks, thank you so much, Ian, for joining me and answering all these wonderful questions that hopefully will inform people so they continue to get vaccinated. Let's protect ourselves from the next pandemic.
Absolutely.
And I also want to thank my Patreons. I always do this in a funny order. So my patrons, I love you so much. We've got Daniel Wynn, Claude Allen, Tom, Skullbeard, Tori Yates Orr, Redding Maley. Hope you're having fun at Burning Man, buddy. Dana Logan, Michael Z. Weinstock, David Leitner, James Hudspeth. Also hope you're having fun at Burning Man. Anthony Zana, Tom Berman, Jen Beverstock, Scott Froschauer. You might be there too. Stay dry. JSB, Jeff Cohen, Andrea Bloom, Jonathan Marks, Kelly Frazier, Michael Clanton, PJ Shapiro, and Carrie Dorr. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, folks. And if you like this, please subscribe, please share this one. I think everybody needs to watch this and hear all the great information that Dr. Ian Boulton shared. And until next time, please stay very filthy. Okay. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.